Yo, how is it going, Bears fans? Welcome back to another episode of Beared Down Uncut, where we talk everything Bears every day of the week. Have the Bears given up on Mitchell Trubisky? And what does he have to do to win the open competition in training camp this summer? We're going to be answering these questions and many more today in episode 22 of Uncut. Welcome back to the channel, guys. Thank you guys so much for the support recently. Almost at 1.3K. If you are stumbling upon this video and want more Bears content, do us a favor. First off, smash a like on it. Secondly, click that red button to subscribe and click the bell for more notifications when we post. I'm your host, Chris Maltby, and today I am joined by my co-hosts, Parth Shaw and Jaylen McClinton. How's it going, boys?
It's going great. It's nice out. Just chilling outside right now.
It's going good. Second episode of the day. The grind never stops.
The grind never stops, and the Mitchell Trubisky talk really never does stop. I'm pretty sure he's the most brought up topic on all of our podcasts and everything for the last couple of years since we started. But let's hop right into it. I got a little spiel to read off about Mitch's career, and then we're going to answer some controversial questions. I'm sure it's going to get a little bit heated there, but let's get right into it. Second overall pick in the 2017 NFL Draft, the Bears traded up for him. He came in following 4 weeks of what we can all agree was some pretty horrid play by Mike Glennon. He passed for 2,193 yards, 7 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions. That Bears team was really bad during John Fox's last year. Mitch finished 8-4. I would say the highlight of that year was when they went into Baltimore and Mitch became the first quarterback to win on the road at Baltimore since some really long ago quarterback. So the verdict was really out on Trubisky after his first year, and I think we can all agree he didn't really get an accurate shot to do what he can do, basically. So sophomore season, the Bears bring in Matt Nagy. John Fox is gone. Sign Allen Robinson, Trey Burton, Taylor Gabriel, some really solid weapons for Mitch, really building around Mitch. Mitch played in 14 games, missed 2 that was caused from a shoulder injury obtained from a hit by Harrison Smith. Screw you, Harrison Smith. That was a BS hit. But Mitch had an 11-3 record on the season, 3,223 passing yards, 24 touchdowns, and 12 interceptions. I think we can all agree that was the jump we were really looking for. You know what I think about Mitch now, but I admit that was a pretty solid season, honestly. He also rushed for 421 yards and 3 touchdowns on a whopping 68 carries, so he really got involved as far as the run game went. Chase Daniel also went 1-1 on the season, and the Bears finished 12-4, made it to the playoffs in the wildcard rounds, lost to the Philadelphia Eagles. We really don't need to talk about that one. But Mitch had a pretty solid game there, too. A really good second half there against the Eagles in that playoff game. The offense couldn't get it going in general in that first half. I think it was a little bit possibly nerves. It was the first time the Bears had been in the playoffs in a while, and a lot of the guys on the team, it was their first time ever playing in the playoffs. So I call that a little bit jitterish nerves and a little bit of inexperience. Also, that Eagles team was pretty solid coming in. So let's head to 2019. After a solid 2018 season, which included a Pro Bowl nomination for Mitch, Bears fans expected another jump from him in 2019. I am definitely one of those guys that was really riding the Mitch taking a jump train heading into 2019. He missed 1 game last season with a dislocated shoulder against the Raiders. It wasn't that bad of a dislocation. He came back a couple weeks later. Luckily, we had a bye after that horrible game against Oakland that we lost. But 3,138 passing yards, very similar to the sophomore season. 17 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, 8-7 record for Trubisky in 2019. He did take a whopping, I'm going to use whopping a lot in this one, 38 sacks. Our friends over at the Windy City Gridiron do something called Sack Watch, and turns out 15 of those sacks were statistically proven to be on Trubisky for not getting rid of the ball, not throwing it away, not using his legs as much as he did in the previous season. He also rushed for 200 less yards, and I said on 20 less carries earlier, so really a down year for Mitch in 2019, which was really unfortunate because we were all looking for something better. It just wasn't as good as we all expected. He also had a really weird benching against the Los Angeles Rams. Earlier, before we were recording, me and Parth both agreed that he was benched. Jaylen said he wasn't, but that's a topic for another day, and we don't really need to talk about that today. That was really weird, though, but 23-18 record for Trubisky in 3 seasons in Chicago. Pretty solid, actually. His fifth-year option last week was declined by the front office. Jaylen, I don't think there's anyone better to start with than you for this first question. Do you think the Bears have given up on Mitchell Trubisky?
No, but I definitely feel like one person isn't, using Trubisky to his full level. And I'm saying that's on Nagy. Nagy play calling was like terrible. It was so ass last year. Like I was contemplating that I could be offensive coordinator in the NFL because
Let's avoid the swears, buddy. I know you're heated.
I could call way better plays than that, but I feel like Pace hasn't because this is Pace. That was the earliest we've ever drafted since Pace has been, our GM, and he took a quarterback. The only quarterback he has taken in the draft since he's been our GM. So I don't think Pace is giving up on him, but I definitely feel like Nagy isn't using Trubisky to his full potential, definitely.
You know what? This is an interesting one for me. Obviously, you guys know my answer is probably yes, and I'll get into that later. But before that, I want to ask Jaylen and Parth, do you guys both agree that obviously it originates from Andy Reid, but do you guys agree that Matt Nagy's offense is one that, as it continues and as it gets deeper in the playbook, is very complex?
Yeah.
Definitely,
it's the most complex offense out there, I feel like.
Yeah, so looking at how Nagy ran the offense, and I heard this from J.J. Stankovitz a couple days ago when he was on the Rich Eisen show. So in the first year, it was really Nagy using basically what JJ called the 101 version of his offensive playbook. Very simple sets, plays a little bit to the quarterback's comfortability because, he wants to get the quarterback comfortable, get him used to the offense so he can later develop, and I think that's a perfect plan. Stankovitz later went on to say that, Alex Smith during his last year in Kansas City was probably running the 505 version of Andy Reid's offense and Matt Nagy's offense. So in year two for Nagy, 2019, I think that he tried to bring it up to the next level, which would be 202. A little bit more complex. As defenses figure out what Mitch is doing running and stuff, you got to open up the passing a lot more and stuff like that. So that's an interesting tidbit there. And I hate to say it, and I'm not saying Mitch isn't a dangerous runner. I definitely think he's valuable in the rushing game, but I don't think Mitch had a perfect grasp on that 202. And don't get me wrong, I mean, there's really good quarterbacks running this offense. Patrick Mahomes ran it. Nick Foles has run it. Carson Wentz runs it. Alex Smith has run it. Some very good quarterbacks have run it. And personally, in my opinion, I don't think Mitch was able to grasp that. And that's what I think led to that weird benching against the LA Rams. We can go back and forth on whether he was injured or not. That was a weird game in general. I think the Bears should have won that one. But that was just really interesting to me when JJ said that. And when I processed it, I absolutely agree with him because you look at Nagy, you can call his play calling garbage, and I think he definitely wasn't the best play caller in 2019. He admitted that he needed to be better. But a lot of the times you saw him bringing in more complex sets and more stuff to throw off the defense. And I think a lot of that, not being successful is on Mitch. And I hate to say it, but I don't think he had that great of a grasp on whatever the next step was in the playbook. So that was an interesting tidbit with my thoughts, kind of combined with J.J. Stankovitz's. But Parth, I want to pass it to you now. Do you think the Bears have given up on Mitchell Trubisky? And we talked about this earlier, but don't name any specific names. In general, do you think the team has given up on Mitch?
Since you told me not to give names, I'm going to say no. I feel like the players are behind Mitch, the front office.
I absolutely agree with that, with the players being behind him.
The players are definitely behind Mitch. You saw that during the season when Mitch was against the Cowboys. We knew that when he ran it into the end zone on that last touchdown, he had everyone jump towards him. Or when he was giving his post-game speech after the Lions game, the first game, or the second game when he popped off, everyone's behind him. They're all giving the headbutt, whatever he needs, the support. So I think the players are definitely with Mitch. The coaching staff in the front office, that's just a whole other issue. I feel like there's
definitely a much more pressing issue because they're the ones that make the decisions at the end of the day.
And there's discrepancies in the front office. I feel like there's some who are with him, some who aren't. So that's just a whole other discussion.
So your answer is kind of like a maybe.
Yeah.
Okay. So next question, and I'm going to pass it back to you, Parth. Let's say someone within a higher up has given up on Mitch. Do you think it's more likely that person is Ryan Pace or Matt Nagy?
Matt Nagy. Ryan Pace ride or die with Mitch. That's his guy. Second overall pick. He took him before Mahomes and Watson. So I feel like Pace's time in Chicago goes around with Mitch's time in Chicago. If Mitch is gone, I think Pace is gone too. You guys can disagree with me that, but I think Pace is responsible for the Mitchell Trubisky pick at the end of the day. On the other hand, Nagy is just brought in to play with Mitch. And if Nagy feels like Mitch isn't his guy, then Nagy can choose his next quarterback. While Ryan Pace has been here for a while. So
yeah, that's a very good point you bring up, and I'm going to agree with it to a T. You said that Pace is ride or die with Mitch. I don't think he's ride or die with Mitch at this point. He has admitted that quarterback play needs to be much better. But I'm going to agree. I feel like Nagy, you look at Andy Reid and his disciples and what they've gone out and done. The Chiefs went out and got Carson Wentz. Patrick Mahomes. The Eagles went out and got Carson Wentz. And I think maybe the fit with what Nagy's looking for in the offense and what Mitch is able to provide maybe just isn't there. So obviously you bring in Foles as a bridge. I was talking to some fans earlier today, and they were saying this is setting up very similar to Kansas City if Mitch doesn't prevail. Jaylen, notice I put the if in there, where the Bears are bringing in a veteran quarterback and eventually going to draft someone to learn behind him, similar to Alex Smith and then Patrick Mahomes. And then obviously, the Chiefs went up and traded Smith to the Redskins, and then Mahomes was the guy. I could see it playing out very well and very similar in Chicago if Mitch can't prove it this offseason. So I do think it's Nagy that is more likely the one that has given up on Mitch. Jaylen, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this one, actually. I'm pretty sure you're going to agree with us. But if someone within the higher-ups has given up on Mitchell Trubisky, is it more likely Ryan Pace or Matt Nagy?
I kind of talked about this in my the last question, but yeah, I definitely feel like if somebody didn't like Mitch anymore and didn't feel like our starting quarterback, it would definitely have to be Nagy. I feel like his play calling kind of proved it last year. If I had to choose Nagy or Trubisky, I would probably choose Nagy, and that hurts for me to say, but I definitely feel like Nagy.
I think that's the first time you've ever caved on Trubisky.
No, it's because like I love.
I think we all realize Nagy's true value as a play caller and know that he can work with a variety of quarterbacks.
Definitely be like at the end of the day, I'm still gonna be a Trubisky fan, whether he's on the Bears or any other team. So, but if I had to choose between Pace and Nagy, I'm definitely gonna have to go with Nagy.
That's a very good point you bring up, because as much as I've said stuff about wanting to move on from Mitch, he says and does all the right things. I very much admire his work ethic. He's a very good leader, and you could say I bash on him and I hate on him all you want, but I'm gonna still root for the guy morally wherever he is. So, next question for you guys. Obviously, Trubisky has a competition upcoming with Nick Foles in training camp. Jaylen, I'm going to pass it back to you. What does Trubisky need to do in training camp in order to win this job for Week 1?
Just play like Mitchell Trubisky. He talked about it with Chase Downs that his shoulder injury has fully recovered, and that I feel like with him knowing the offense as well as Foles does, he knows the receivers more. He knows the weapons that we have on this team in Robinson, Miller, and stuff like that. So if he can come in, especially if we don't have like OTAs or training camp and we start at preseason, with him already knowing the receivers and having a chemistry, that he just use that to his advantage.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about who's going to start later, but I also feel like if there's no OTAs and stuff, it could be Foles, because at this point, Pace knows that his job is probably on the line this season, and, he doesn't want to lose that job. And I think, we talked about Pace still being more in favor of Mitch, but at the end of the day, it's a business, and I feel like he could say, hey, start the guy that we know can do it, whether or not he knows the receivers or not. But as far as this question goes, Jaylen brought up a very good point in saying he's got to play like Mitchell Trubisky, and I'm going to say the same thing. I think he needs to play like sophomore season Mitchell Trubisky. He was really impressive in 2018. 24 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. That's decent, but he also played in 14 games, so you never know. He could have gotten up to that 30 touchdown threshold mark. He was one of the best fantasy football quarterbacks. I think actually the second best behind Patrick Mahomes in 2018. So that was really interesting. He needs to rush the ball more. Obviously, we all know he's a better athlete than Nick Foles at the end of the day. But I think if he can return, I think the way he wins this job is if he returns to his 2018 ways and he is consistent as hell. I said not to swear earlier, but he really does need to be crystal clear with his performance. he's someone who, if he continues to be inconsistent, I think we can all agree that he's not going to win that job. He needs to be consistent. He needs to show up every day. He needs to hit the throws. He needs to continue to incorporate his legs, and he needs to pick up that 202 offense, I guess, as I called it earlier. I think he needs to continue to learn the playbook so it can be a good mesh of what he likes to do and the difficulty that Nagy likes to incorporate there with the offensive playbook. We can talk about him winning the competition and whatnot later, but I think he needs to be very, very perfect and very pristine and not be inconsistent like we've seen in the past if he wants to win this job in training camp, because Nick Foles is going to come in. He knows the playbook pretty well. He's proven that he can do it in the past. I personally think he has an upper edge. Reporters like Brad Biggs, Adam Jans, and Aaron Lemming have all reported that they've heard that Foles will have the upper hand. At the end of the day, that's just media, but I think those guys have a pretty good idea what they're talking about. So I think Mitch has to come in and be pretty perfect if he wants to win this job and play like he did in 2018 with a better understanding of the playbook. Parth, what do you think? What does Trubisky have to do to win this competition?
I think you guys hit it on the dot. 2018 Mitch was probably the best Mitch we've seen so far. And there's games last year where he looked amazing, too, against the Cowboys, the Lions. I just feel like we need to use him out of the pocket more. We saw him last year against the Cowboys. When he's running the ball, when he's comfortable doing that, he's just a much better quarterback. And Nagy's got to learn to play to his strengths, too. There's a lot of times when the play calling was questionable. I feel like a lot of the Mitch slander is just on Mitch, or the offense slander is just on Mitch. But I feel like Matt Nagy deserves some of the slander.
He's accepted some of the criticism, and I hate to interrupt you, but the question is, what does he need to do to win the job? So are you saying like he does need to return to that 2018 version, like I said?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, or even better, I think.
I think he does need to be better than that 2018 version. Yeah. We still saw his inconsistencies in 2018, but it was bearable to watch. So, one more question here. Sorry for cutting you off there, Parth, but you started talking about outside the pocket, and I was like, okay, that's not what I asked. Let's head into the next one. This is the final question we got to ask here. Another very long episode of Uncut here for episode 22, but this is also such a good conversation that needed to be had. Yeah. So, Parth, I'm going to pass it back to you. We talked about Mitch needing to be very, very consistent in training camp if he wants to win this job, and I think we can all agree that if he does slip up, he might lose this job. So, as much as it hurts to think about this, I want you to answer this question. Will Mitchell Trubisky be a Bear following the 2020 season? Will he earn an extension in Chicago?
My heart would love to have him back. I love this guy.
But what is your gut saying?
I'm saying yes. I think this guy steps up to the plate. I've seen him grow as a player. He's been clutch in his clutch situations when he's needed to be. I feel like he steps up and does his thing, and becomes the quarterback that we Bears fans always wanted him to become. Nick Foles isn't the long-term solution. Mitchell Trubisky is, and I think he will do that for us.
Yeah, it also comes down to, when you think about contract negotiations, if he does have a good year, I think it could be a little bit weird as far as how much to pay him, because, he had a decent season and then a bad season and then what would turn out to be a good season. So numbers could get a little bit interesting there, similar to the Dak Prescott situation. I'm not saying he deserves $40 million. I don't even think he deserves the $25 million, but, his team could ask for a lot of money and put on the table that he's still young and stuff. I'm going to say no. I don't think Mitch will be a Bear following 2020. I said it earlier in this podcast, or this episode of Uncut, but, I think we're trending towards that Chiefs way of Foles being the guy if he can stay healthy. I do think if Foles wins the job and gets hurt, I think it could open up a great chance for Trubisky in the middle of the season to come prove that he's worth it here in Chicago. But I think it's trending towards drafting someone in the first or second round in 2021, and I think that happens regardless, by the way. Even if Mitch is still the guy, I think they still look for someone. Mitch isn't going to be here forever, and they can really develop someone behind, whether it's Trubisky or Foles. I think we can all very much agree that both of those guys will not be on the roster following 2020. I think he doesn't get it done. I said it earlier, I support Trubisky morally. He's a good kid. He works really hard, and as a college athlete, I really aspire to be like that and be a good leader and work hard. That being said, the inconsistency really just comes over this all. We talked about it earlier today with El Jefe, and he had a really good point where he said, you either fight or you flee when competition comes. I don't think Mitch essentially flees. I think he comes and gives a good effort in training camp, because he always comes and gives a good effort, whatever it is. He always talks to the press after bad games and gives honest answers and stuff. and he always tries his hardest. You really can't overlook that, and you really have to respect that. That being said, I think Foles has the upper hand heading into Week 1. That's a discussion for another time, but I do not think Mitch is a Bear following 2020. Jaylen, I already know your answer to this one, but does Mitchell Trubisky get an extension in Chicago?
You like you said, you already know my answer. If you've been watching our podcast for a long time, you know how big of a Mitchell Trubisky fan I am. Call me a truther or whatever they call it. I definitely feel like he's going to be on the run in 2020.
2021.
2021. Excuse me. Like I said, that he wins the starting quarterback spot like I know he can. He plays well or well enough to get that second contract in Chicago. I just don't feel like Foles could be. I don't think Foles is a bad quarterback at all. I'm not gonna sit here and hear.
I think I agree with all you guys. Parth said that Foles isn't the long-term answer, and I absolutely agree with that. And I think Jaylen would agree with that as well. Like, even if Mitch isn't the guy, I think we can all agree that we're gonna need to draft someone and start grooming another quarterback.
Yeah, like I said, I don't think Foles is a bad quarterback at all. I just don't feel like he's a reliable, consistent starting quarterback. He does good in the playoff games when he's coming in for starting quarterbacks, but when he starts, you see what happened last year when he got all that money, became a starting quarterback, got hurt, came back, and still didn't play his best ability. So, yes, I feel like Mitch is going to be, earn a second contract and be here in 2021. And, hopefully he does well and proves everyone wrong like I know he can.
Yeah, I think we all agree that we know he can prove people wrong, but will he do it? 2020 is going to be a make-or-break season for Mitchell Trubisky, and it's all going to go down this summer. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. One more tidbit I want to add in before we close this one off, Mitch or Jaylen. You did say that Foles, he's had inconsistencies as a starter. I agree. That being said, I don't think he's ever been on a team with this much talent as a starter. This team is heads and tails better than Jacksonville. Heads and tails better than the St. Louis Rams when he was with them. Heads and tails better than the Kansas City Chiefs when he was with them. Can you at least agree with me on that?
To a point, yes. I can agree with you with that. Last year, Jacksonville was not that good of a team. They were not that same team that made it to the AFC Championship in 2017. I can definitely agree with that, yes.
So, one thing we can all agree on is that whoever's the quarterback in 2020, they are going to have some gosh darn weapons. This is approaching the 22-minute mark, another long episode of Uncut. It's fitting for episode 22. You guys have been showing the support, and we're going to give you guys the content that you deserve. If you do want more content from us, head over to our website, bearddown.com. You can find articles, blogs, and columns on there. You can also head over to the social media. If you're on social media, you can go to Instagram. You can find the links to our fan pages down in the description, and you can also follow the podcast on Instagram and Twitter. Jaylen McClinton, Parth Shaw, I think that was a good conversation. We uncovered a lot. Any last words before we head off?
I'm surprised it didn't get hated because, even though me and Chris are very good friends, we usually get hated when we're talking about the quarterback position. So I'm surprised it's
very promising in terms of our friendship. But that'll pretty much do it for us, guys. Once again, thank you for tuning in to episode 22 of Uncut. It's been a pleasure to be your host. Once again, I am Chris Maltby. Thank you for joining us tonight. And as always, Chicago, stay safe and bear down. Peace.